All right, I'll bring the panelists up. I'm Jeremiah. I'm based here in Silicon Valley, and I focus on how technologies help companies connect to people. And that's been my career as I've started a number of research firms. All right, let's start by understanding who's in the room. I want to poll all of you. Please raise your hand if you are an independent, you just work as a freelancer on your own. Okay, I'd say about 20% of the room, so your well-being is up to you. How many of you work in small companies, maybe 10 to 100 people, okay? About a third of the room. And how many people work in companies with maybe over 500 to 1,000 employees? Okay, just a few hands. And then how many people work in companies with over 1,000 employees? All right. Is anybody here in HR as a function, is your role? Okay, 2 hands. Great, glad to have you. Thank you. Gives us a good pulse, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so tying to the vision of transformative tech, thinking about minds being connected in consciousness and society, it is best put that we look at how companies, one of the major institutions, the employers, on how they're helping. And we've really come a long way when you think about it, the way that workers were treated in the Industrial Revolution or in the agricultural space. They were treated very poorly. And now you see the benefits that are offered to employees now. It's significantly changed. It's not perfect. So Nicole said I could have this panel to bring the benefits leaders on stage and those working in HR. This is the very first time at TransTech. And so I had 3 companies in mind, and I got them. Okay, so I'll allow them to introduce themselves. We'll just go down the line. Maybe you could talk quickly about your role in your program. So it'll be Abigail Hollingsworth, VP of Employee Benefits at Salesforce, followed by Michael Suzy, Director of Wellness at LinkedIn, and then Ursula Osterly, the Director of Innovation, who's also working in HR from PMI. Abigail, tell us about your program at Salesforce. I'm a big fan of interviewed and know what you guys are doing, but let's tell the story.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I go by Abby. My name is Abby Hollingsworth, and as Jeremiah said, I manage benefits. So basically, I build, design, purchase programs that will help our employees stay healthy and hopefully get them all well. And so in terms of our well-being program, we actually really just started our intentional program only about 2-3 years ago. Prior to that, we had a lot of very wonderful benefit programs at Salesforce, but we really didn't have a way to collectively share out this information to our employees. And so about 2 years ago, we actually launched our well-being brand internally, Camp Be Well. And it is made up of 5 pillars, which is Nourish, Revive, Move, Thrive, and we recently just launched our financial well-being pillar, which is Prosper. So that's how we look at it at Salesforce, and I can talk a little bit more later.
And we'll dig into that, especially with their mindfulness meditation. It is one of the standards now, a leader in the space. Michael, LinkedIn, your CEO has been talking a lot about compassion.
Yes.
Which seems like a term that's at odds with many Silicon Valley companies. Why is that so important?
Well, I think that compassion is something that is vital for a company to have success. You know, I think that it may be looked upon as being some sort of a soft word, something that doesn't have business impact, but it does have a really strong impact on the bottom line. It helps build trust. It helps people reduce conflict, which obviously helps business run more smoothly. And I was thinking about, compassion as a business model when our CEO, Jeff Weiner, started talking about it much more outwardly. And it got me thinking about some past careers of mine that I've been in, namely being in sales. And, sales maybe never talks about compassion, but ultimately, a good salesperson sits down with the person they're trying to sell to, and they try to put themselves in their shoes. They don't come in with, at least a good salesperson doesn't come in with their product or service and try to bludgeon the person with it. They try to hear, what are you looking for out of something? What are your pain points? And that ultimately is compassion. It's helping put yourself in someone else's shoes, understanding where they're coming from. So within LinkedIn, with our employees as a manager and other managers, it goes a long way to helping to build strong relationships. One of our cultural values is relationships matter, which is rooted in compassion. I also think even as LinkedIn as a product, wanting to know what our users, what they want out of a product is a measure of compassion as well. So I think it's vital.
Can you just give an overview of the program, your benefits program?
So I actually joined LinkedIn about 9 years ago. We were about 900 people in Mountain View. We're about 15,000 people.
Wow, you were so early. Wow.
Seen a lot of growth.
Prior
to joining LinkedIn, I had started up my own online wellness company. It was called SusieFit.com. I wrote exercise and nutrition programs for people. And that was preceded by a career in a couple different internet startups back in New York, both in the career space and the online lead generation space, which was preceded by being a collegiate football coach. I have a degree in history, secondary ed, so I've had a wide range of things that I have done in my life. So I was running Susie Fit. I had a friend who knew a project manager at LinkedIn. This was back in 2010. LinkedIn was looking to start a wellness program, really as part of the talent strategy. It's about how do we recruit top talent and keep that top talent. So specifically Bay Area, that kind of rolled up into food, transportation, and wellness. So I came out with my approach around wellness, which we now call our 6 tenets of wellness, which are thoughts, breathing, hydration, nutrition, movement, and rest. And our program, I and my team, we really look to create opportunities for our employees to learn about, engage in, and ultimately develop strategies to have those tenets be part of their everyday life.
Hydration is not one that's mentioned very often, so that's very unique to hear.
Yes, it's vitally important. One little stat I read, and this is only one study, but I use it every time I can, as little as a 2% decrease in hydration levels has a negative impact on cognitive function. So, I mean, everyone here, I'm sure, has jobs that require you to be mentally sharp and quick-witted. A little bit of hydration go a long way to keeping you on top of your game.
These guys are drinking right now because you said that.
We actually have a little mantra, too. Other things are fun to drink besides water, namely tequila, red wine, IPAs. But if you pollute, you must dilute. That's one of our mantras.
Ah, I like that. Oh, great. Ursula, tell us about yourself and your program.
Okay, so in both the industry we're working in, the pleasure and substance consumption, as well as our company is going through really radical transformation. And that's putting a huge stress on our employees. And so employee well-being or wellness has become a key topic that really has attracted C-level attention and is really driven top-down. So while we have the luxury, if you go to our office space, we have a gym, we have a wellness restaurant, which is adapted diet, we have a medical doctor on site, we have a nutritionist, we have all these things, which is a real luxury, and yet when we talk to the people or do interviews, there's a big sense of stress and anxiety due to the change going on. And we did a health risk assessment of the organization to really look at what the key issues are. And it comes down a lot to sleep and anxiety. Those are the 2 core things in the company.
That's interesting because sleep is not happening typically at the office. I know you have the nap room, restroom, but that's something usually outside of the office.
Yeah, but this lack of sleep impacts collaboration, impacts team building, impacts cognitive performance. I mean, it is the basis. As you said before, you cannot have compassion if you're not rested, okay? And so that's really becoming a key issue. And it's employees themselves who came up, who answered us in the survey. So it's an interesting starting point. So while we have all the classical wellness solutions, so we decided to take a little bit of a different view and see how can we work on the mental well-being, the emotional well-being, all those soft factors, because if you balance that, the rest, people will take more self-care. So we really focus on self-care, and we decided to take more of an innovation focus and see what is there out there in startups and things. So we were already here last year, and we picked a couple of startups from who are upstairs to pilot and test with, which we will talk about later.
Yeah, so her organization is doing a lot with the cutting-edge stuff that we see upstairs. Speaking of which, I would love, so I work with corporates, and all 3 of you are in corporate. What is your honest opinion of some of the technologies upstairs? This is for anybody.
I can start. So this is my first time here, and I was very impressed. I mean, usually most of the conferences I attend are, as you can imagine, HR, benefits conferences, and I actually walked out when Jeremiah was showing me around thinking, whoa, this is innovation. So it was really, really impressive.
Yeah, I'd echo that. My first time here as well. So personally, I love everything that's up there. I think it would be great to learn about all of it. A lot of it is over my head in
Yeah.
terms of the science aspect of it, but my tendency is to dive into that and definitely accept it. I also have my corporate hat on. I'm like, how would I convince our CFO that we should invest in something that maybe doesn't have the data behind it to prove that it's going to have the efficacy that it touts? But overall,
yes.
I think it's really amazing.
I would say, I've spent time here, and I was here last year, and I've interviewed many of these startups. Small percentage have clinical trials or tests or data. This is emerging market stuff that we see upstairs here. Ursula, your thoughts?
So me too. I love all the startups here. That's why I keep coming here. But when you come from a corporate perspective, there are some challenges that we have to look at. So one is to convince the supporting management, but it's also the employees themselves. Because we have to be honest, us who are here, we love this. So we're already aware of it, we're conscious, and we're curious to find out more. But when you go to the corporate, their employees are Mr. and Mrs. everybody, and most of them are not even aware they're in stress or they could use something. So you actually have to go a lot of work around communication, a lot of work about getting them to try. And trying, why not? Okay, you can set up these stands, promotion and things, and you can get people to try, but how do you keep them on a discipline of going on? Because this is not a wow effect, it's not an entertainment, it's a discipline of self-care and management, like a diet or exercise or sleep. And we don't do it already with the other factors, and here you're asking them to do more. So this customer desirability becomes a really, really key, and this is one of the biggest things we're exploring. And one reason why we're testing so many startups is because most startups here, they've had their early adopters, but nobody has data on how do we go large mass scale, okay? And so we test, and so it's a win-win. It's a pilot working with the startups. They can see what works and what, and we adapt the program along the way to see what different factors work. And for us, it allows to do a triage of what sticks and doesn't, and the things that stick, then we will roll out, and the ones that don't, well, such is life.
Please.
If I can add, I totally agree with what you said about, we are in this world, especially myself, for example. I'm in this world where I think about healthcare and employee well-being all the time. And so the vendors, the service providers, all you folks who come in and talk to me, we all are in the same page, right? We all want to be able to help employees, help people become the healthiest self that they could be. But the reality is we can be very passionate about that, but the average, I love what you said, the everyday employee, the everyday person who's kind of dealing with their life, this may be sort of if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this could be like the actualization part.
That's right.
Right? They're still down here trying to deal with everything. And so for us at Salesforce, we just constantly have to do this drumbeat of information. Because while we may not see immediate results, and I do have vendors who are like, I can't believe it's not as high as I thought it would be. But people are dealing with daily lives, and we just don't know. And so how we approach it is constant drumbeat of information, well-being information, with the hope and goal that you will reach that person at the end of the day.
So,
can I?
Please, yeah.
The other issue is also in companies, we're global, and we're all global, is the cultural diversity. Okay, so what works in one culture doesn't work in another. And if you go to Middle East or if you go to Asia, we're talking about closer value systems or mental models of people.
Even regional in the U.S.
Yes.
as well.
And so that's also part of the testing, how much you have to localize and how much is global behavior. So that's all the things you can only iterate through experimentation.
Thank you. So what I heard from the panel is this building here is filled with early stage, but you have general population workers that want to try, but a behavioral change, a lifestyle change, a lot of work has to be put in place to bring this to the mass market. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Let's dig into your programs. So just to set the stage, the reason, well, please add to this. What I have observed in the research that we've done is that companies often offer benefits programs for these following benefits to employees and companies. One is engaging employees, so they're engaged in work, duh. Another one is retention, so they don't leave. And a third one could be productivity. Did I miss anything?
Happiness. We actually look to measure happiness on our EVS.
How do you measure that?
You ask people, how happy are they? But we do on our EVS, our employee voice survey, which we now do quarterly. We used to do twice a year. It was like 64 questions. Now we do it quarterly. It's many fewer questions. We ask people. We kind of get an NPS on how people's happiness is.
Yeah, and Ursula, it sounds like you did something similar to that. And obviously, this impacts the brand. You know, it's like you're not going to go to an empty bar. Same thing as like if you look at the Glassdoor ratings of a company and they're junk, you don't want to go work there. And talent is so important right now, as we heard from the prior panel. So
we don't want to ignore productivity. You know, I think if you put productivity first, happiness can suffer. You know, and because you may be productive but not really enjoying your job, you may be looking for a way out. You know, but happiness is that tide that really rises all boats. So while you may make one key metric move like productivity, a lot of other key business metrics may fall. But when you focus on happiness, the productivity does come along with that.
Okay, great.
And then there's a component also of diversity. You want more and more diverse teams. You want culturally different teams, cross-functional teams, global teams. So the whole collaboration, it becomes a big issue too. And so unless you have balanced employees that are emotionally stable, it's very hard to do collaboration, team, and empathy.
That's a great point. You're working as a collective. Okay, so I just wanted to set that as a stage. That's the reasons why we're seeing this. And we're going to tie this back, of course, to transformative technology. So let's do that. Let's dive into the programs. Salesforce. So you've seen the Salesforce Tower, but did you know the CEO is a big proponent of meditation and mindfulness? A tech CEO being mindful. And I've been a fan of Mark Benioff on how he's tried to change the way he's voted on measures or been a vocal supporter for society to benefit, even offering to pay more taxes and getting in fights with the Twitter CEO about taking care of the city. That's a very serious stance for a multimillionaire or billionaire to take, especially in today's age. And then the 111 program, giving back to the community. So you can see this ethos. I think it makes them credible. Please talk about the program inside and focusing on mindfulness and meditation. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so yes, that's a great segue into this. And yes, you know, Mark is a huge proponent of this. You know, there's a lot of internal meetings that we have where we start with a mindfulness exercise that they bring in for
Everybody's
5
in their
minutes.
suits?
You know, for us regular folks out here, you know, there's a few folks in that room and you can see it, and we all sit there and we watch the live stream and we, you know, take a moment to take that breather. So it is really woven into the culture. We've brought in Plum Village to speak to our employees, to help people understand the whole mindfulness practice. We had about 4 years ago a mindfulness day where the monastics of Plum Village came, very similar to this. We live streamed it to every employee across the world, and they had different topics, from mindfulness eating to how to start a mindfulness practice. It was amazing. And actually, they even took a break. The folks who were in there took a break to do a mindfulness walk around downtown San Francisco. So if you can just imagine, about probably, I think it was about 100 people following the monastics around downtown San Francisco.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
Yeah, just thinking about the monks in their garb and being humble, and corporate suits following them around downtown. I mean, that is San Francisco. Come on. It could have been anybody.
Yeah, and we have, you know, internally in terms of benefits and sort of the actual manifestation of mindfulness, we have mindfulness rooms in many of our buildings and towers.
What do they look like?
So it's actually very beautiful. You walk in, they're very warm, lots of wood. There are cushions on the floor. There's also a bench if you prefer, because people like to meditate in different ways. And I was telling Jeremiah the story when we first opened the first ones, you know, it was interesting because we didn't see as much people doing it, right? And so finally we surveyed our employees and said, what can we do to make this better? And one of the things we found out was many people didn't know how to meditate.
They don't know how to meditate.
They didn't know. They don't know.
It's a high threshold, a barrier to change your mind.
Right.
Focus.
Right. And even though Mark is totally into this, right, and has always talked about this, but the question of, well, do you know how to do it, was never asked. So we actually have put in an app in there to help guide employees who can kind of educate. We even brought in folks to do sort of meditation practices, people to help those who want to learn do that.
So you have used technology to help people to be more mindful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we also we offer, as part of our benefit programs, we offer a $100 a month stipend for well-being for you. So however you look at well-being, that could be to pay for gyms and such. You can also do it for mindfulness apps. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. If you haven't seen, there's photos of Plum Village monks at the Dreamforce conference, the largest conference in Silicon Valley, sitting next to corporate suits, and it is just such a dichotomy. You see East meets West, high tech meets ancient, all slammed together, and I think that is representative of what is happening. So in my research, I've watched how digitization has impacted media, transportation, and now it's coming inside of us. And so this is why I'm so excited to do this. LinkedIn. So I've had the chance to see all three of these programs. Michael, I say you have a very beautiful facility that you have laid out, and tell us about what you're doing, and also the education you're doing to help employees too.
Sure. So we do have the good fortune of being able to have some beautiful spaces. We build gyms in our larger offices, so typically if a head count gets over about 400 people, we do look to put in on-site physical fitness space. Studios we build in about 12 other locations around the world as well, which becomes really a multi-purpose room. It could be a yoga room 1 minute, a TRX room, a meditation room. We also have begun to design mindfulness rooms. We aren't quite as advanced as Abby has at Salesforce just yet. We're learning the right layout and design, been playing with some different things in that capacity. But we also look to do a lot online. We have many of our offices, specifically our European offices, are smaller, because we have an office in almost every Western European country. So they're not going to get the on-site facilities that we're going to get in many other places. So in order to reach those folks, to reach remote people, and to know that you have to meet people where they are, and there is not a silver bullet, so to speak, that we do look to bring a lot of our content online. One thing we do from a technology perspective is we actually partner with a company called Move Coach, which is an app that is device agnostic, so people can sync a number of devices, wearables to it, and we set up different metrics within it, milestones, that if people achieve them, either within movement or mindfulness in a given week, they can earn wellness points.
And what does that get you?
We have an online reward store. They can go and redeem those points for, mainly it's clothing, some other products. Usually it's all branded with our wellness logo, which does a great job in terms of marketing the program. And then the online aspect also, obviously, if you're not familiar with LinkedIn Learning, it's a product of LinkedIn. I encourage you to go and explore that if you haven't already. And companies that have LinkedIn Learning can upload their own content onto it, so only their employees do it. So we have a great production studio in Sunnyvale, so we create a lot of our own content. I host a talk show with a live audience and different guests. And we do a lot of this video creation to really get that content out onto LinkedIn Learning, which people can watch then. If they're commuting on a train or a bus, they can actually access it via the app. Maybe I'm a little bit biased towards education, being that that's what my degree was in, but I believe that wellness and all these things are rooted in education. It's learning what these things mean, and it's learning how to make them part of our lives. So it's a big part of our strategy. So
you also mentioned the adoption rates of the Wellness Points program. It was pretty high. So when I've interviewed HR leaders, it's under 10% of the employees sometimes use benefits, which is pathetic. So what were you seeing? So we measure, we call like our wellness GDP, which is how many unique individuals around the world will earn wellness points in a given month. And we hover between 45 and 50% right now of our employees earning wellness points. Now that could be someone who's a one-time user. They came in, went to a class, but it could also include people that do it, many, many times. So we're really happy with it. But it doesn't include people who already have wellness programs baked in that they just might not be registering with your program as well. Correct. Okay, great. Ursula, you are, in my opinion, leading some of these trials with some of the startups here. Tell us about what you've experienced and experimented with. We'd love to hear.
Okay, so we've tried some of the trans tech I mean, if we go, for example, meditation, you have the luxury of having a CEO that believes in it, but in most cases you don't have that. And so many people, they want to meditate, they've heard about it, but they don't practice or do it. And so we're using technology to make it more attractive. And so, for example, we have a pilot going with Trip, where Trip is using virtual reality based on a meditation protocol to engage people more into it. And that is much more attractive because people don't have to focus on the breathing. It's through the experience that they do the breathing exercise and so. And so those are the kind of things we're doing. Now the question is, for example, how long do you want it? Okay, so we're kind of testing different time frames, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or 7 minutes or so that it becomes really a break. So it's not a long meditation session. It is how to bring in during the day when there are moments of stress or before a stressful meeting to take a quick break rather than doing something else or smoking cigarettes or whatever, that you take a quick break into catching yourself, balancing yourself through an experience.
And you don't know how, you do not need to know how to meditate.
You do not need to know how to meditate, and I think that's part of the thing. But then there's also, I mean, you guys have a younger workforce. We have an older workforce coming from an older industry, so that the concept of meditation, we're not coming out of California, is harder to do. But it's really about self-care and trying these new things. But what we see is, back to you, is also education. It's really a lot about education and personalization. So one of the pilots with it that really worked quite well was First Beat. So First Beat measures your HRV. You do during 3 days, you measure your HRV. And then after 3 days, you get a coach who goes through your HRV during the whole 3 days and looks at your lifestyle. Looks at when do you have moments of stress and when do you have moments of recovery. Because one of the things we underestimate is actually the recovery phase is just as important as the stress phase. We cannot get rid of stress phases. Life is stressful, but we can also focus on better recovery. And we always talk about reduce stress. But no, you can work on recovery. So First Beat goes through it. And the employees really liked it because they went through, okay, what happened here in your day that did this? And for some people, it actually may be going home at night because either you're in a phase where you have trouble with your spouse at home or you have small kids and it's a nightmare that stresses you. So, you know, those are also things. What can you do? It's not always work, okay? It's getting it across your life. So it's this blend of using technology to give a first basis of assessment, and then having a personalized person help you make sense into actionable items. And in First Beat, we had people put in 3 life objectives that they changed on, and everyone that participated did at least 1 lifestyle change afterwards. Okay, that is, I think it's great impact.
Let's talk about privacy. When we talk to the startups, it's maybe the 5th thing that comes up in their vision and how the data will be used. But this is, when we're dealing with corporate, there are specific regulations. Please educate the crowd on what the limits are. I just need one person to respond, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, there's in the U.S. we have HIPAA laws, so an individual's personal information must be protected. Those are rather general in nature, but then every organization may have their own appetite for the level of data they're willing to take in from an individual. LinkedIn definitely is more on the conservative side, where we don't really want to see that much individual data on our employees. We like to see aggregated data, anonymized data, to see that things are working to some degree. But I would say one of the things that, I don't want to say we struggle with this, but it's definitely an obstacle, or it makes our the time to market, if you will, with a lot of technologies is going through our house security protocols. So, everything from having penetration tests done on servers. It's not enough just to know that, hey, we're not going to get individual data back, but it's knowing that that data that's being stored in a server, that it's secure. That if someone does, that we promote, go, hey, go over to this app and download it, it's going to make you feel great, and someone's putting in health information or just any kind of personal information about themselves, that data is protected wherever it happens to be stored.
Thank you. That's a nice segue. So that's why I want to talk about the future of employees, employers, and technology. And do you imagine, well, actually, let me ask an open-ended question. What is your future, all 3 of you, on how tech and wellness for employees looks like? Like, do you want to know every employee's aggregate heart rate variability score? Do you want to know how much sleep they have? Like, how far do we take this? And this is some serious ethical thing. So
Totally.
please, Abby.
So no, we don't. We don't want to know individual data, but this is a conversation that we're having all around, because a lot of the things, when we talk about engagement, when we talk about education, when we talk about communication, we oftentimes have to just push that out to everyone at the same time, very broad-based. And that's not how people work, right? They receive information differently. I receive information differently from Jeremiah, and so on and so forth. So we do talk about, when we talk about personalization and how we can get to the person and give them the right tools that would be meaningful for them. How to do that? It's, again, an internal debate that we're having.
And everyone's different, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Right? So yeah, it's about how to reach that person, but in order to reach that person and individual, we do know that we have to probably get some data. Right? And so it's a balancing act. It's a huge balancing act.
And there's a lot of I mean, so these two companies are tech companies, and yeah, you're a digitized company too. So there's even more scrutiny, especially social networks, and how are you guys using this data? So this is a tricky thing. Ursula.
It goes more than data. I think one of the other issues is that the corporates have to pick up a lot of things around employee well-being because society isn't, and because the medical healthcare system globally is failing.
So that's really interesting. So you're saying this is the employers are the key pillar, one key pillar of an institution for society.
It's not that we're asking for it because it's a cost, but it's not being done, okay? Right. And so it's like when if you go back a few years ago, all these things around leadership, soft skills, agile thinking, design thinking, that training all came from the corporates because the schools did not have it in education yet. And here we're looking also at the well-being, because I mean, when people go into pre-diabetics, all these pre-issues before they go into the medical system, it already impacts society, and it impacts families and relationship, but also the productivity. And so there's an unmet need in society, and for corporates it has an impact, a financial impact. So we are investing a lot in society. I think all of us are doing that. Yeah. Because why should a corporate do meditation? I mean, but it's a core component. And as such, you're blending the gray zone of what is an employee, what is the right of the employees, and where's the boundary between an employee and an individual citizen. And it's not a smooth thing. So that's one. But then also the mobile workforce, working out of home, the blending of the work life is another thing that makes it more difficult to separate the two. What kind of workspace do you have at home? Because it's not also only the well-being, but it's also the air quality, it's the work environment, how do you sit, your computer you're using, that gives all the back issues. So it's actually quite a big system that all needs to be put together, and in some ways right now it's the corporates that are driving this, hence all the testing, and you know, people like Deloitte helping companies figure this out. When we had a great meeting in Europe, cross-corporate, that they organized with different companies, where we're exchanging best practices of what works and what doesn't work in the privacy issue.
Yeah, that's great. Anything to add to that?
I was just going to say, I totally agree. I mean, I think a lot of companies are taking the torch that a lot of the governments don't kind of have. I mean, especially in the U.S., we have these conversations as well, because there is another aspect. We are stewards of financial budgets that we have to be mindful of, but we are making investments and we're taking risks because we don't see it happening around. And so one of the conversations we have within my team is, how far do we take it to be kind of this social justice benefits team, right? And that's it's a true conversation that we have to balance with also people knowing we have to balance the budget, right? So
yeah, on that, so you know, metrics that we look for are, so we have on-site fitness classes, and so we do want to know how many people are attending. You know, we don't want to be spending money on a yoga class that no one is going to. So those matter. But I also think the stakes matter in that, I forget what organization it was, but their CEO was giving money out to people that demonstrated they were getting a certain amount of sleep every night. And that, someone said it? Yes, correct. And I mean, if they're giving away money, I think they needed to know that people weren't, oh yeah, no, I got 8 hours last night. So depending upon, I think, a corporation's, what they're putting forth, dictates a little bit about the appetite for the data they're willing to receive. We're giving away wellness points, which on average cost us about 2.5 cents. If someone's fibbing on that, we'll live. But if you're giving out cold hard cash and a couple $100s to everyone of a large organization that just says they're getting good sleep, you probably then, in those instances, do need to get a little bit more data.
There's a real balance here. When I interviewed other HR leaders, some of them, the advanced companies are moving away from challenges to encourage employees to do things. Like the step challenges, you've all heard of that. Apple pushes this because that's their product, of course. But some of them found like people were just cheating the system. They were taking their watches and things and putting it on their dog so they can get more points.
Well, for us, so we don't do a move challenge. We used to. We found out that the people who were really into it were the marathon runners already.
Yes.
Yeah, so it wasn't a behavioral change set.
Right.
And I heard a horrible one. This one's going to make you shudder. That there's often a weight loss challenges that some corporates do in January, and so people were gorging in December so they could gain weight, so they can impress their colleagues on how much weight they could lose for wellness.
So we do a movement challenge. So movement is one of our tenets, and we do through our Move Coach app, and usually in September, because that's when we have our wellness fair. We do a movement challenge, but it's really, another thing to take into account is not everyone is able to move the way everyone else can. And so you say, oh, go for a steps challenge. It's kind of like, that doesn't, it's not really inclusive of the entire workforce. So with the app, there's a point system that people, based upon their exercise or whatever they record. So even if someone happens to be wheelchair bound, if they were to go into one of our gyms and go to some of our accessible equipment, they can still exercise and record points. And then to avoid what Abby pointed out about the marathoner getting all these steps is, anyone that reaches the goal gets added into a raffle. So even if you won had the most movement, if you will, in a particular month, and someone barely got that goal, everyone's on equal footing, because we did one year, and my first manager was an elite marathoner. And before I joined, they were doing some sort of challenge, and he won it every year. And people wouldn't join, because like, well, why would I join? Because he's just going to win it. And so you do need to find a way to democratize it.
You do. I want to bring it back to one of the themes of trans tech is like thinking about the mind and digitization and technology. And we kind of glanced on these topics, at least from meditation, software, or aids. But some of the startups and companies or the studies from MIT that are thinking about how to measure the mind, how to focus or reframe the mind, and then how to advance the mind and then make it a collective, if I could summarize some of the vision that Nicole put forth. That's really not being tested in corporate yet. I would love to hear your reactions to technology, whether it's a device or an app or looking at your brain patterns or your brain waves. Have you thought about that, and what could be the opportunities for your organizations?
No. No, we haven't thought of that, to be honest.
It's too far out for some corporates.
Yeah,
okay.
We have 2 programs that are digital technology-based, that are digital cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's probably the closest we have, because cognitive behavioral therapy is about reframing your brain. And so those are the closest. And we are still testing it. It's coming out with some interesting results, because for those who know cognitive behavioral therapy, it's not overnight. One of them is a sleep app. And it's an 8-week program, and we see a lot of people engaging up front, and we actually do have fairly good engagement, but we also see drop-off, because I think people want just that Ambien instead of an 8-week program to actually help you sustain kind of learnings.
So you get that anonymous data aggregated on the sleep of your employees?
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that inform your organization? What do you do to change? How do you use that information?
I mean, we're still just in the matter of actually driving more people to it, because we do believe, actually it's really interesting, because several years ago I was talking to a doctor, a physician in one of our consultants, and I asked him, what is the one thing, if I had only a limited budget to spend on, what is the one thing I can do to provide our employees? And he actually said sleep programs. Very similar to what you said, and so right now we are still at the stage of trying to drive more people into it and giving education about sleep. But again, back to your question, cognitive behavioral therapy is probably the closest, not a lot of the ones here yet.
Okay. I haven't seen too many startups trying to help corporates with sleep, so that is a unique need. Thank you for sharing that.
Same with us too. Sleep's a big
Yeah,
focus.
sleep
Okay.
is a big thing, and there is no, I mean, it's all a solution we're struggling with because it goes a lot with hygiene and lives and self-care and other issues if you have kids working late and things, so that's, but I think on the brain, it still lacks science, and you have to be careful as a corporate what you do to what you propose to your employees, okay? So a lot of things is science. And then for me, there's also the question, people are looking for quick fixes, okay? I need to finish something for tomorrow. I have to do a presentation. I have to do it. What are the quick fixes? Because a lot of these things could be used for quick fixes. And when is it sustainable? So I think there is, and then the whole equipment. I mean, it's still clumsy, and with us, with 80,000 employees worldwide, I mean, it's not in the cost structure of being able to roll out anything. So there's still a lot of questions around this before it comes, but I'm sure it will come in education, in performance, in relaxation, in different shapes and forms.
Thank you. I think we're at the time marker. I hope you found this panelist just very insightful. These are the leaders in the space. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you.